Welcome to CSC 143 Intro to Data Structures. We're using the book Building Java Programs, and today I'm going to be showing you, giving you a little more explanation about Building Java Programs Edition 4, Exercise 9.11 called Filtered Account. So in this Chapter 9, we are learning about how to extend classes with inheritance. And this problem here is it's an advanced problem in the chapter. And it assumes you understand how class inheritance works and how overriding functions work, and it's going to rely on all of that knowledge. So I'm going to warn you right now that I'm not going to give you the answer on how to do this, but what I am going to do is explain all about it and maybe give you a little more explanatory code and talk to you about, kind of give you some pseudocode on what needs to be done here. You're going to have to do the code yourself. So first let's take a look at what they give you. And before I do that, I just want to say, overall, this problem, students find the problem difficult because they don't show you all of the code that is involved in here. And that really should be the case, that you don't need to see the code. The whole point of object-oriented programming is that you can be given an interface such as this and then write your code based on that without having to know exactly how they implement it. Okay, so this is actually an important skill, but I will be showing you a little bit more detail on the code so you can learn how to trust the system. All right, so what we are given is a class account, and we are given an account, a couple of methods here. This is a constructor that takes a client object C. Now your first question is probably, what's a client? Well, they don't tell you, and they don't need to tell you. Okay, the point is that you just need to know that in order to create an account, all you have to have is a client C object, okay? And then it would get passed into an account. You don't need to worry about how to create the account. Now it is true that you're not going to be able to test your code without being able to create a client account, but again, you don't have to know it in order to be able to write the code. Okay, the other method they give you is a method called process. Process takes a transaction. Same thing applies here. They aren't going to give you the code for a transaction class, nor do they have to. All you need to know is that whenever there's a transaction for a count to be processed, you just call process with the transaction, sorry. Okay, so that's one, this is description of one class, account. Now, they are going to tell you a little bit more detail about the transaction object. So the transaction object, they aren't going to give you everything. They aren't giving us the constructor, okay? But what they are giving us is a method, a getter on transaction, which returns the value of this transaction in pennies. That's a little bit odd. You would normally think of a monetary account, being based in a double, but it actually makes a lot of sense to do the transaction in pennies because in most systems, that's the smallest anything could be. It's just a penny. You don't typically deal with fractions of pennies. All right, but anyways, that's all they tell you about transaction, okay? And then now what they tell you that you're going to have to do in this problem is you're going to create a new account type class that filters out zero-valued transactions. So again, remember that this account continually processes transactions. Let's assume transactions are debits and credits, that there's a value to these debits and credits, okay? So you set up a client with probably a name and an account number, and then you process a transaction to deposit some money from your paycheck, and then withdraw some money to pay for gas, and withdraw some money to pay for your groceries. And at any point, with those transactions, you can get a value for the transaction. Now, oddly enough, they don't give us the balance for the account, but presumably there's some other method they aren't describing here that it gives us a balance, okay? But we don't need to know that, is what they're trying to tell us. So we're going to design a new class, and it's going to be called FilteredAccount, and it says the instances can be used in place of an account object. What does that mean? Now, hopefully by this point in the chapter, you've realized that anything that can be used in the place of another object, it's got to be a subclass of that object. So bells should be going off in your head saying, okay, filtered account is going to extend account. Okay, it includes the extra behavior of not processing transactions with a value of 0. Okay, so that's a little bit confusing undoubtedly, but we know that in a bank account, there's transactions, right? And you can understand that some of those transactions might have a value of 0. I can't think of very many good reasons why you would go to your ATM and withdraw a 0 amount, or you would get paid 0 amount, but it's possible, okay? Probably the problem would make more sense if they said processing transactions that are credits. Okay, that might make more sense. Okay, but they chose to filter out accounts that the value is 0. Okay, so the class should indicate that a 0 value transaction was approved, but shouldn't call the process method to process it. Okay, and you have to have a single constructor that accepts the type client. Okay, so they don't draw out the header here, but we now know we have to have a constructor that takes type client, and in addition to that constructor, there's one method which returns %filtered. Okay, so I just quickly put the header in here, so we know that filtered account is going to extend account. Okay, that's where we start. Now I'm going to switch over to Eclipse and do a little bit more. So here we are in Eclipse, and I've got the same header here for filtered account, and I've just taken the information that was in that problem and I've filled out these two functions here. So they told us that your class should have a single constructor that accepts a parameter of type client. Okay, so that's exactly this. It takes a parameter of type client. And why don't we go ahead and look at this a little bit further. So this is a constructor. Okay, so constructor must always call super class constructor. Okay, that's pretty much always the case. So filtered account is a subclass of account. So what you need to do in your own code is you need to put the code here. How do you call the super class constructor? Okay, that's something that we've already covered in my previous videos for section 9.1 through 9.4. So if you don't already know, take a look at those videos or read the book. Okay, then what do you have to do? You have to fill in your member variables. Okay, and what are our member variables? Well, we didn't actually create any, so let me just create a section here. So we don't know what our member variables are yet. Once we figure it out, we need to fill those in here. Okay. We do, however, know that the only parameter that we get is client C. Normally, we would have input parameters here, other input parameters that we would then use to fill in your member variables. But that's not the case here. So it's a little bit different. All right, now let's take a look at %filtered. So again, what it said in the problem is the new class should indicate that a 0 value transaction was approved, but shouldn't call the process method to process it. Okay, so now remember, we are extending the account class. And you may remember that the account class, here I've switched back to the account class, and you can see that the account class, in addition to having a constructor, we only know that there's this one method here, process transaction T. So let's think, what can we do with a process transaction in order to be able to achieve a %filtered? Let's take a look at it. Think again. So what do we need in order to return a %filtered? Well, a percent means you're going to have some number in the numerator and some number in the denominator. Let's go back to the code. Okay, so I know that what I need to do is return a numerator divided by a denominator, right? That's the general form. Okay, what's the numerator here? This is the number of transactions that are not value 0. What's the denominator? Number of total transactions. Okay, so we have two numbers that we need to figure out. The number of transactions that are not 0 and the number of total transactions. How are we going to get that? Well, again, the only thing that we know about the account class is that there is this process process method. So let's put that in here and try to override it. So we're going to put in public Boolean process transaction T. Okay, so this is an override. So anytime that this filtered account calls process, we can actually call the superclass's process transaction. So let's put in here, call the superclass process method. Okay, I'm not going to tell you how to do that. That's what you're going to have to look up. Now, we probably want to do something before it, and we may want to do something after that. Okay, so let's think, what do we need? What do we need? The numerator is the number of transactions that are not value 0. The denominator is the total number of transactions. Well, if we get called for process every single time there's a transaction, we can easily keep track of that second one, right? So the denominator So if we know that we need to keep that track of the total number of transactions, then we need to increment the count of transactions right here. Okay. Now the other thing we need to keep track of is the total number of transactions. Now the Boolean here, let's remind ourselves. What is this Boolean value return? Let's go take a look at the problem information. Okay, so we see that it processes the transaction, returns true if approved, false otherwise. So that's not going to say whether the transaction was 0 value. But we do have this information here. On the transaction, the value method here returns the value in pennies. Could be positive, negative, or 0. So that's something that we can tell whether the transaction value is 0 or not, right? Okay, so let's go back to the code. So we know that the transaction dot value returns the number of pennies of transaction. Okay, so my pseudocode is going to be if the value of transaction not equal to 0, increment numerator, which is the number of non-zero transactions. Okay, let's go down here and take a look again. Number of transactions that are not value 0. That's what we want. Okay, so let's also take a note here. It said indicate a 0 value transaction was approved, but shouldn't call the process method to process it. So we've got a little bit of a bug here already in our pseudocode, because this would process it, and then it would increment or not based on whether it's 0. But we really need to check whether it's 0 first, right? So let's move this up. The whole thing. Okay, so we can make this a little bit more detailed. If it's not 0, now let's indent. Increment the numerator, and then call the superclass method. So we'll do that. If it is equal to 0, we don't want to process it, so we're going to skip that. Okay, so the thing you should realize hopefully by now is that we don't have any member variables here. What are the member variables that we need? What do we need to keep track of as filtered account is being called throughout here? What we need to keep track of, two things. First thing is number of non-zero transactions and the number of total transactions. Now, I've been referring to them as the numerator and denominator. I think that's actually a very poor choice of words for a memory variable because it doesn't really tell you anything about what they really are. Give me a better name for this and give me a better name for this, okay? Possibilities, lots of possibilities. You could be non-zero, could be good, could be valued, any of those things, okay? What do you call this one? Great possibility is total, right? Total transactions would be even better, but a little bit long. So come up with some name here, okay, for those memory variables. Then in the constructor, so the number of non-zero should equal what when you first create this account? There's been no transactions, right? So it really should be 0, right? And then the number of total transactions should be what? Again, there's no transactions yet. It should be 0. Okay, so that's the pseudocode for the constructor. And let's double check what we've got going on here. So in the case if the value of the transaction's not equal to 0, we're going to increment this and we're going to call the superclass method. But you notice that we actually have to return a Boolean here. So what we want to make sure is we actually return the superclass process method, because that will return the correct number, whether it's, and again, that's not the value. It returns whether it's true or false, or whether it succeeded or failed. Now, in the case of a 0 transaction, so if I didn't put any more code, then in the case when it's a 0 transaction, there would be no return statement, and that would be a problem. So what are we going to return for the case of it's 0? Is it true or is it false? Well, it's an interesting question. It's a little bit hard to say, to tell you the truth. I think it should probably return true because we did actually process it in some sense. And we know that since it's a 0 value transaction, that the effect of it should be nothing. And so it should be true. They don't specifically say that if the transaction is 0 value that the transaction should fail. But you do have to make sure that you return something from the process. And then lastly, let's double check here. So we're going to return the numerator and a denominator. And these are probably integers. And don't forget that you need to do in integer math as something divided by something is going to be 0 if it's less than 1. Okay? So you have to take into account integer versus floating point math. Okay? But other than that, it should work. Okay, so I've shown you now how the pseudocode for how you're supposed to do this problem. And I've shown you that you don't need to know how all of this other stuff is created. But I know that some of you are still having a hard time without seeing that other code. So what I went ahead and did is actually created a bunch of classes that are at least the shell framework of what these other classes are about. So let's start at the very lowest level of the hierarchy of these classes. And let's see, what's the lowest level? It's a client, I think. What is a client? A client is probably some name, and it's probably a number, okay? And you're going to have getters and setters for that. Then on top of that client is built an account, right? Because the account takes the client, and then there's probably going to be a balance. So whenever you have, you create the account, and then whenever you have a process transaction, this is going to affect the balance. Okay, so it's probably going to be doing something like looking at the transaction's name and seeing whether it's what kind of transaction it is, and then applying a value to the balance. Let's also take a look at the transaction. Okay, so the transaction is probably an amount in cents and some type, like a credit or debit. Okay, so from here, you're going to have to use the transaction's publicly exposed methods to get the value of the transaction, which we've already seen is .value, and also what's the type of the transaction, is credit or debit, and then apply that. Okay, at the very top of the hierarchies, we are going to have to create our own client class to actually does this. And this is what the code might look like to actually run this bank, okay? You're going to have to create a client with a name and an account number. You're going to have to create an account based on that client. Then you're going to have to create a transaction with an amount and a type of transaction. And then you're going to have to finally process it. And so how does it work with this filtered account? Well, so for the regular accounts, you might process a deposit of $3.50, a deposit of $0, a withdrawal of 50 cents, and then what this should print out is that the balance is now $3, okay? But if we created instead of a regular account, we should be able to come in here and do a filtered account, okay? Filtered account is going to be set up the exact same way as a regular account, and because filtered account is a subclass of account, we can use it interchangeably for account, okay? But now there's a new method that we can now say, let's just do it, system println percentage of non-zero transactions is, and then it's John count dot percent filtered. Okay, and that should now work. Let's double check what this is. It's undefined for type account, and that's actually correct. Okay, so the object here, account, does not have a percent filtered account. So we should actually fix this up by saying if John account instance of, and if you might remember from my prior videos, instance of is a Java keyword that allows us to determine the type of a variable. So it's an instance of filtered account. Then we can do some little magic here. And let's say we can now force John account to be a filtered account. Now by forcing it to a filtered account, the error goes away because it knows that, see, you can see from the tooltip here that filtered account knows that there's a percent filtered method. Okay. Now I can't actually run this because I didn't actually implement all of these things. But the fact that I have no compiler errors here tells me that everything is done correctly for how it should work. Okay. So that's a long-winded explanation of 9.11, but it gives you the full details. Let's go back for a second. Before you submit a problem, I always recommend you reread the problem to make sure that you understood everything. Okay, so there was this account, this class called account. It had a process method on it. We are going to subclass that that class with this new filtered account class. Okay, and filtered account has to be able to return percent filtered. Okay. But whenever we are called with the process method, and again, because we're a subclass of account, we will be called on with the process method, then we can override that process method, calling the superclass, but also checking what is the value of that transaction. And if it's a non-zero value, then we can keep track of the non-zero versus the zero. Okay, and we don't want to call process if it's a zero value transaction. Okay, so all of that pseudocode that we wrote looks like it should meet the specification here. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and you'll get notifications about all the other problems that we'll do from building Java programs.